Monsieur Gray with a revolver in by the
bar.
Yes.
I wouldn't murder my own father. Yes, you would. What are you talking about?
Inherit everything.
It can't be me.
This is based on the following evidence. The gun that was used in shooting was part of the gun collection here at Mystery Manor. The lock cabinet was not damaged, showed no signs of forced entry, and thus must have been unlocked by the key that was found on the victim, Yvette. If you recall, Monsieur Gray knelt over his mother when she was shot, at which time it would have been a perfect time for him to slip the key back in her apron where it was found.
Oh, you dirty dog. I'm innocent.
And we thought that was affection, right?
I knew that.
Furthermore, neither the gun or the key have visible fingerprints on them. This would lead us to believe that the murderer must have been wearing gloves, and we can see that he was doing that at the beginning of the night. Check his pockets. Check his pockets. If you examine the last letter that was supposedly sent from Mr. Body, you will see that the signature on the letter matches the signature on the will. Therefore, the letter is legitimate and viable source. Furthermore, if you examine the letter of last correspondence, you will see that Mr. Body indicates that the murderer was the person who had the most to gain from his death, and thus the inheritance of the will.
You couldn't wait until after tonight?
It is true that many people had a lot to gain from the will the way it was subdivided into many categories. However, the overall clause at the beginning states that if a male heir exists at the time of Mr. Body's death, that he shall receive the entire inheritance. Upon reviewing the birth certificate of Monsieur Gray, I have concluded that Monsieur Gray must be Mr. Body's biological son.
I am his son, but I didn't kill him.
I came to this conclusion based on a few things. First of all, you can deduct from looking at the birth certificate that Mr. Black cannot possibly be Monsieur Gray's biological father because of the timing of the pregnancy and the birth. By looking over the birth certificate and comparing it to the starting date of Mr. Black at Mystery Manor found on this letter of intent, you will see that Mr. Black had not been at the manor long enough for him to conceivably be the biological father of Monsieur Gray. Yvette, being just arrived from another country, would have only been in contact with Mr. Body and his uncle Theodore, who was too old to father any children and was also on his deathbed.
Right.
That wouldn't inhibit him.
You can tell that Mr. Body went to great lengths to protect the secrecy of the affair and his illegitimate son. Upon examining the birth certificate, you will see where the father's name on the birth certificate does not match the typeface on the rest of the document, showing that this document must have been altered. Another red flag that Mr. Black is not the father of the child. This leaves us with only one conclusion, and it is that Monsieur Gray found out about his biological father and killed him out of resentment.
I'm innocent. I would not kill my
He
father.
then had to kill again the only person who also knew his own truth, and that was his mother, to stage any inheritance that he might
I'm
reap.
innocent. There's no fingerprints on the gun.
As stated in the will, Monsieur Gray was entitled to a pension at the least and the whole estate at the most. If Monsieur Gray was found guilty, he would not receive anything. Take him away.
That's a terrible accusation. I would never kill my mother or my father.
Take him away.
Wait. There's the lawyer, Professor Plum, still has another statement to make. A letter, I believe, to read.
Where?
It's a surprise.
Read all that. Okay. As his lawyer, I was asked to deliver a letter upon his death to his only son. I was a bit confused by this, as until this night, I was under the impression that Mr. Body had fathered no sons. But I will read the letter of explanation aloud to you so that you can hear it being taken into custody. To my son, I assume that if we are reading this, that I am long gone. This is not how I had wanted to lead my life, and for you to find out who your true father is. But it is what your mother and I had thought was best at the time. I had always wanted a male heir to pass along my father's name. It was with great sadness that Mr. Manor went under another name for so long. When I was unable to conceive any children with Miss Scarlett, my college sweetheart and first wife, I sacrificed my love for her in order to possibly gain a son with someone else. It was not my intention to father children with your mother. It was more of a rebellious father children. Oh, I see. It was more of a rebellious state for both your mother and for me at the time. Yvette had just settled into Mystery Manor from another country and knew no one. And I was in the middle of a separation and the death of my uncle. When we found out that Yvette was pregnant, she was already in love with Mr. Black, the man you have been calling father for all these years. Yvette and I thought it in everyone's best interest to keep our affair a secret. We did not want to hurt Mr. Black or the woman I was involved with at that time, Mrs. Peacock. I went on to marry Mrs. Peacock, as you know, but we too were unable to conceive of any sons. We had our 3 beautiful daughters, Lady Lavender, Mrs. White, and Tanya Teal. You can see, for obvious reasons, why we both, Yvette and I, love the fact that you got along so well with each of the girls.
Oh, yeah. Not me. Not Mrs. White.
Did
She
not
got married.
condone you having a romantic relationship with any of them. After having the twins, Mrs. Peacock lost any drive to have any more children. And we secretly underwent surgery and had her tubes tied without my knowledge. It was only upon my stumbling across her medical records recently that I myself found out that she had betrayed me and started the process of divorce. Once I found out that I was never going to have another son, I knew that I would have to tell you the truth so that I could finally have my male heir. Again, I did not want to disrupt your life, and your mother begged and pleaded with me not to. So I have waited until the last moment possible, that being my death, and have instructed my lawyer to give you this letter upon that occasion. I hope that you will forgive my mistakes in life and take upon your true name, if you will, as the will states, Mystery Manor, and everything is left to you, bar as you are not the cause of my death.
I didn't know. Wow.
Okay, hands behind the back.
Thank you.
Hey, the chauffeur has to take me home.
All right. They asked me to dance, but I'm not gonna dance. But they're close, and we're gonna have the awards.